Jai Hind! Namaste! Welcome back to Galp Taru, the Tree of Stories, which is a celebration of Indian folk tales. My name is Ambalika and I am an author and storyteller. And on the occasion of the 75th year of Indian independence, I thought it to be a wonderful idea to revisit the country, its values and everything that it stands for through the lens of its folk tales. And as a step in that direction, I came up with this special storytelling initiative, Galp Taru. Galp Taru has two sections to it. One is the curtain raiser and the other is the actual folktale in itself. The purpose behind having curtain raisers has been to tell a little bit more about the community, the values, the beliefs, the rituals, and a little bit of background about the story that is going to be presented. It helps getting perspective and understand the context in which stories have been told, because only then is it going to make sense. Otherwise, through our 21st century lens, when we revisit the stories, they may not really make any sense to us. Through this week's folktale, let us try to escape the heat and humidity which is making life very irritable for each one of us living in the plains. Let us escape to the central Himalayan region, conveniently known to us as Uttarakhand. Many of you would have visited many places in Uttarakhand like Nainital, Mussoorie, Dehradun, Almora. But how about revisiting them through their folk tales? Sounds interesting? Let's get going. Uttarakhand, or Dev Bhumi as we Indians like to call it, the abode of the gods. And rightly so. It is so richly blessed with fauna and flora. Everyone who has visited any part of this region has been mesmerized by its beauty. Home to the highest mountain peaks of the world, the most sacred rivers of India, and a rich and diverse flora and fauna, how could this place be anything else? And sure enough, this reflects in their folklores as well, be it the songs, ballets, or stories. Uttarakhand can generally be considered as being comprising of two parts, the Kumaoni region and the Garhwali region. And we are focusing on the Kumaoni region. But that really doesn't matter, because no matter which part of Uttarakhand you go to and want to listen to a folk tale or a folk song, it will always begin by first describing the season and the natural beauty. Ordinarily, the folk tales talk about the struggles of everyday life. And in the hilly regions, this means the struggles in getting firewood from the forest, drinking water, taking the cattle out for grazing, and pangs of separation because you've been married off to a far-off village, or because the family members have gone to a distant place to earn a livelihood. They also talk about past glories, like the virtues and the victories of and conquests of their heroes. And in some cases, they also talk about fairy tales and magic. Mostly they end in tragedies, or they have a sad ending. But no matter what, it always begins on a happy, positive note, talking about the beauty of the nature, the birds singing, the flowers in full bloom, and the kind of mood it exudes. And the sentiments of that story or song or poem is generally conveyed through the natural beauty. That's the speciality of the folk tales and the folk literature coming from this region. This region has basically always been governed by its own local dynasties, and it was only in 1815, after the British defeated the Gorkhas, that it opened up to the East India Company. And after that came in a barrage of statesmen, missionaries, travelers, explorers, artists, and just simple people like you and me who were just trying to visit a new place. They all came for their work or for sightseeing, but they left behind a lot of important documents. One thing common to all of them was that they were so keenly interested in the customs and beliefs and rituals of this region. Most importantly, the missionaries, because of course of their evangelizing activities. One such person was Reverend E. Sherman Oakley. He was deputed by the London Missionary Society. He had set up the mission in Almora, and his work in understanding the local customs and rituals led to the first documentation of folk literature of the Kumaoni region. Up until then, these folk tales and folk songs were recorded or kept in knowledge only by the local bards who were referred to as the Hurkiyas. But with the incoming and onset of modern education, the documentation of these things started happening, and as a result of this, it started spreading far and wide. The first Indian and the next person after Oakley to do any kind of documentation was the renowned archaeologist, ethnologist and linguistic researcher Pandit Gangadat Upreti. Pandit Upreti was of course quite impressed and inspired by the work of Reverend Oakley, and he went on to collect a lot of proverbs and folklores from both the Kumaoni and Garhwali region and compiled them to bring out the first collection ever of proverbs and folk tales of this region in 1894, and it was titled exactly that, Proverbs and Folklores from Kumaon and Garhwa. And for this detailed and very extensive research that he did, he was rewarded, or rather honored, with the title of Rai Bahadur by the Viceroy and Governor General of India at that time, Lord Mintz, in the year 1910, 8 months before his passing away. So we now know him as Rai Bahadur Pandit Gangadat Upreti. Tara Dutt Gairola was the next person to continue the work carried out by Pandit Upreti, and in 1934 he published his collection of folk tales. I would like to add one more name to this list, Jim Corbett. Jim Corbett was basically into animals, not much into folk tales, as we all know, especially those of us who have visited the Jim National Corbett Park. But there is something about his writings. He's not exactly telling you a folk tale, but his writings reflect, you could say that it's an exact mirror of the kind of society he was living in at that point in time. The tranquility of his language, the serenity that it conveys, shows the true lifestyle of the people, while not diluting the problems that they face, the challenges that they were trying to overcome, and the real human emotions underlying all of them. Talking about the Kumaoni language, it has 13 dialects in its own. By the way, it's recognized as one of the tribal languages of Uttarakhand, and it has got 13 dialects of it as identified by Sir George Abraham Grierson, whom we have met in an earlier episode of Galp Taru. And Sir Gregson identified that some of these dialects belong to even the Tibeto-Burmese language family. Some of the most popular tales of this region are Jero Jamro, Gordhana, the love story of Rajula Malu Shahi, the bravery of Sangram Singh Kharki, and a courageous tale of the 22 Bafal brothers. There is some British contribution to this as well. Not exactly a contribution, it's actually an offset, and unfortunately an unhappy one. It is the story of Frederick Pahari Wilson, also known as the Raja of Harshil. Who was Wilson, and why are we so interested about him? And how does he still impact India's ecosystem? Frederick Wilson was a 25-year-old soldier working in the East India Company's army and debuted in Afghanistan during the early 1830s to fight the Afghans. But he was not a good soldier. He was not even a brave one. He deserted the army and found his way into the Kumaoni region. Here, he settled in a village called Harshil. He took some time to settle down, like he really built himself a big house, found himself 2 wives, had children with them, and then he got into the business of building an empire for himself. One of the many things of his empire was an apple plantation, which is good, no complaints, because even today the Wilson variety of apples is much sought after because of its taste and crunchiness. So full marks to him for that. But what he did afterwards, or rather alongside of it, is what is not worthy of any respect. You see, Wilson was a good hunter and a good businessman too. He could spot a business opportunity when he saw one, and probably that made up for his lack as a soldier. Wilson's eyes fell on the forest resources of the Kumaoni region. Being a good hunter himself, he started hunting down birds and animals, especially the Himalayan musk deer or the Kasturi mrig as we Indians call. There was great demand for the fragrance of this deer, and therefore there was great export demands as well. So you can guess what started happening to this population of the Himalayan musk deer. It started decreasing. Adding to this, when the Indian Railways started its operations, Wilson started cutting down the forests. He started selling the cedar and sal woods to the railway company so that it could lay out the tracks. As a result, deforestation set in, so much so that it was the main reason why the Chipko movement had to be called by Sundarlal Bahuguna in the early 1950s. And it doesn't stop there. He might have left the East India Company and its army, but during 1857 he was very much hand in gloves with them. He double-timed Bahadur Shah Zafar and was sending secret messages to the Firangi soldiers, and thus he had a very important role in ensuring that the British recaptured Delhi. Wilson's success and wealth went to his head, and soon he started thinking that he is above even the laws of the universe. He was all-powerful. And so things got better or worse. He started to challenge the village deity. Legend has it that he asked the deity to walk over his swords. The deity was, of course, not going to let it go like that. The deity responded with a curse that the Wilson bloodline would get wiped out after one generation. And so it did. By the time the grandchildren came up to be adults, they all met with mysterious ends. Hurkiyas and then the folklore enthusiasts. These are the ones who have preserved the folktales of the Kumaoni region. But the books that were once published are now no longer in print. The few remaining copies are not easily accessible to the public either. One may or may not run into the electronic copies of this book online, but there's no guarantee. However, through Galp Taru, you are definitely going to get to listen to one such story. It's titled, Grateful Animals, Ungrateful Men. Does this mean that we shouldn't trust men? Or that animals make better friends? Well, there is something about the man-animal dynamic, and it's beautifully captured in this folk story. So while I go and prepare for this story, you go ahead, click on that subscribe button and hit the bell notification so that when the story comes live, you don't miss it. Until then, Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.